If you have a lot of great ideas and a lot of, the entrepreneurial world, you have shiny object syndrome, then your focus and lack of clarity will spread you thin. And I was guilty of this for sure, because I started 4 companies out of the gate. I was so excited to be out there, Harley. I was like, I'm going to create a real estate empire, and then I'm going to build a media agency, and I'm going to have an events company, and I'm going to a coaching company. Literally all these things I was doing at the same time, thinking that was cool, but that was trendy, a hustle grind mentality. It didn't serve me. It really hurt me in the long term.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Scale Smart, Grow Fast podcast. Your personal brand is one of your most powerful business assets if you know how to use it. In this episode, Erik Cabral, founder of OnAir Brands and trusted advisor to Fortune 100 and Inc. 5000 companies, shares how to craft a message that connects, build a brand that converts, and leverage podcasting to grow your business. With over 25 years in brand strategy, Erik's going to offer a proven, mission-driven framework for turning clarity into momentum and influence into opportunity. Erik, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. How are you doing today?
Fantastic, Harley. Thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure. Now, Erik, tell us a little bit more about your background. How did you get into marketing and doing podcasting?
Yeah, it was not by design for sure. Corporate America and school, traditional college, and finding my way up the corporate ladder was a wonderful way to make a living. Creating artwork and logos. And in the beginning, very, very early stages of my career was like my first, I'll never forget, Harley, a postcard, like a 4x6 postcard that was going to go direct mail, they called it, for all the kids out there who don't remember mail. But yeah, you would get these postcards and I was like, Mom, look. And I took a stack of them. I was like, look, my first printout is like hundreds of thousands of these out there. And then eventually the coolest thing was seeing my work on billboards, driving down a highway. I would see, oh, look, I designed that billboard. How cool. So that was really my background. Just loved designing, loved graphic design. At the time, they called it commercial arts. And I'm like, what's that? But eventually all these tools became more and more familiar, Adobe and all these guys. And when I finally left after 21 years in corporate America, I was so done. I wanted to retire, at least from the art world. And I got into, of all things, real estate investing. And my wife was like, you don't know anything about real estate. What are you talking about? What are you doing? And I was like, I just want to build wealth. I was in a building wealth wealth creation phase of my life. And I was very focused on how can I get there very quickly. I lost 20 years not knowing anything about finance, being financially illiterate. And I was like, oh, I read this book from Robert Kiyosaki called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then eventually read Cash Flow Quadrant. It's like, oh, wait a minute. In this quadrant, he talks about the employee, which was me for the majority of my years. And then it was like, now you need to own a business or become an investor, or so it was all these different avenues. I was like, oh, I want to own a business and I want to become an investor and I want to make passive income. So that's really where it all started. And once I jumped into the investing community, I realized that the one thing that they had in common was an abundant mindset. And I came from the opposite, a completely scarcity minded type of environment where it was dog eat dog type of world. Everybody was just against each other. And it was really bizarre to be around people that wanted to help you. And especially the most successful people would always end a conversation. And I was like, wow, I have to adopt this. How can I help you? How can I provide more value in your life? And then that was the game changer. And I just said, I need to be around these people and I need to record these conversations I'm having in the hallways for my sake, so I can remember these conversations and just extract value out of it. And that turned into a podcast, and people started to point to me like the guy recording a conversation as the podcast guy, and it wasn't necessarily a podcast at the time. So that's really where it all started.
I love that growth and transition, and especially the abundance mindset. And it really has shown through in your success and how you've helped others too now. So, speaking of that, you've helped build so many brands. What would you say is the first thing you look for when helping someone define their personal or business brand?
The first thing I look for is how much clarity they have. A lot of us can have all these ideas, but they're not very focused. If you have a lot of great ideas and a lot of what we call in the entrepreneurial world, you have shiny object syndrome, then your focus and lack of clarity will spread you thin. And I was guilty of this for sure, because I started 4 companies out of the gate. I was so excited to be out there, Harley. I was like, I'm going to create an real estate empire, and then I'm going to build a media agency, and I'm going to have an events company, and I'm going to a coaching company. Literally all these things I was doing at the same time, thinking that was cool, that was trendy, hustle grind mentality. And it didn't serve me. It really hurt me in the long term. Now I benefited greatly from it for sure because it made for a lot of connections. All the people that you may have mentioned in my bio was a result of me creating all that. But it was a quick avenue to burnout. There was no way I was going to sustain that. So eventually over the years I had to shut one, two, three, and eventually, shut down all the companies so I could focus on one. That's the first thing I look for when I speak to an entrepreneur who's all over the place. I'm like, what are we focusing on? What do you have complete clarity on? And who do you serve? Like, who is the audience for that particular product that you have? Because yes, I understand successful entrepreneur, you have four, five, six businesses and you're running them all successfully. But for this particular one, what is the message? What is the clear mission? Who does it help? Is typically the very first thing that I look for.
How do you help other entrepreneurs that you're working with? Maybe we're in that same situation that you were with, like the hustle culture of like, I'm going to do 4 or 5 different businesses and that's really cool. How do you help other entrepreneurs that maybe are still in that like hustle and grind mindset? Maybe they've got multiple businesses going on, they're all over the place. Like, what kind of strategies or tips do you use to help them get that clarity and realize maybe they could be more successful by having that focus that you mentioned?
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of your personal brand and ensuring that if you have multiple businesses, even more so, the reason you should focus on your personal brand, because then everything sits and falls under that umbrella. Let's take Elon Musk, for example. He's got the Boring Company, he's got Tesla, he's got forget the solar company's name, but he's got multiple companies. Same thing with Tony Robbins. I think he always boasts. He's like, I'm running 186, businesses right now. Literally has tons of businesses that he's involved in, but the umbrella of Tony Robbins is what sits at the top, his personal brand. So I always try to encourage our clients or prospects who have multiple businesses and want to talk about everything. Like, if you want to do that and you don't want to take my advice, let's build a personal brand that has its own systems and your beliefs so that people can fall in love with you. And then when they're ready, they're going to raise their hand and go, hey, Harley, I love when you talk about family. I love when you talk about homeschooling, whatever it is that you want to talk about that clearly identifies who you are so that they can identify with those values. Now they're like, oh, I didn't know you had this type company. I didn't know you had that type company. It opens the door for the conversation. So when they're ready, they want to do business with you, the person, not the company.
So, speaking of that personal brand, is it more important to focus on like your personal mission values, or do you help people think about more of like ideal client they want to connect with and you tailor it to like resonate with them, or is there some kind of in between?
So our process is typically really boil down who you are, because a lot of people, you'd be surprised, don't know who they are. Or if they do, they've never verbalized it and they've never put them into single word values, which helps them to communicate, right? Because that's what we're all about, is like, we have to communicate and we have to communicate clearly. Because if we don't understand our mission and how we serve people, then how are others supposed to understand as well? So we have to gain clarity first, and then we can help and serve more people, because now they go, oh, he's clearly communicating. I totally understand. For example, I have tons of people in my network that love to do cold plunges. They love to do heat therapy. They love to all this biohacking, but say they're real estate investors. And then they'll often come to me and go, Eric, man, everybody's reaching out to me. I'm getting so much feedback. But why is everybody asking me how to build a cold plunge in their garage? And then I look at their feed and I'm like, because all you're doing is talking about cold plunge therapy. Is that what you want to do? Do you want to build a lifestyle brand? No, I'm a real estate investor. Then stop talking about the things you don't want to serve or
Mm.
solve. So that's the biggest challenge. So I want to make sure that our clients, number one, know who they are and what the brand DNA is for them. And then we could really dive into who you serve. Let's get really clear, because a lot of people will also go out the gate, I serve everyone. But the old adage, if you serve everyone, then you're for no one, is true. Because then now people don't know to raise their hand and go, oh, that's me. Because you're talking to everybody. You're talking about an older lady in her 60s, and then you're talking to a young male in his 20s. Like that is so wide and not focused. That's typically what we do. First step, you. Next step, who do you serve?
Speaking of that clarity and who you serve, what are some other common branding mistakes that even smart businesses make, and how can they fix them?
It's this, where they try to create a message for everybody. That's a huge one. especially if you're coming out of the gate, as a new entrepreneur. You're 0 to 6 figures and you're trying to figure this out. You don't want to alienate, you don't want to, push out potential buyers or customers or, clients. And I get that. I was the same way. But at some point, you're going to have enough case studies and enough wins where you can start to identify the common thread throughout all of the people that you've been helping. For instance, years down the line, after we started producing a lot of podcasts, I zoomed out and then I looked at all the clients. I was like, oh, they're all men. They're all middle aged. They're all family men, right? A lot of them were Christians. I was like, oh, this is my avatar. These are guys who I've been creating podcasts and serving over the past 3-4 years. So then that became one of our avatars. It was like, so I can speak directly to that person to the point where I've given them a name. I know what they eat. I know what they do on their time off. I know what type of cars they drive. So it's like those type of things is where we can get really granular so that when you do record and you do create messages, you're speaking specifically to the person you can help.
Yeah. Well, speaking to the person you can help, podcasting is obviously a huge part of your strategy. Why do you see it as such a powerful tool for brand building and business growth?
I'm about to turn 53. And when I started not too long ago in 2017, it was still, hey, can I take you out for a cup of coffee, Harley, and pick your brain? And when I started building my real estate portfolio, it wasn't just kids or younger people. It was anyone that saw me having success relatively quickly. Like, oh, he bought a multifamily building in less than a year. And so people were asking me out to coffee. And it got to the point where I was like, let's just have a call. I don't think we called it Zoom calls. We're just like, oh, let's just meet virtually. And then I started to look up to others as well. Like, oh, how did you get there? I want to get to 24 units. I want to get to 100, doors. And I would ask for their time. But coffee is never really that enticing, but a podcast is. Hi, can you or would you be interested in having a conversation on my podcast? And at the time, I could confidently say it was 100% yes. And now everybody's got so big and they're too big and they're like, oh, yeah, speak to the gatekeeper, speak to my assistant or whatever. And I can't get through. But at the time, everyone would say yes to that. And it is just a wonderful opportunity for you to lead with value and say, hey, I have a platform for you to speak your message to my community versus you want to have coffee where I'm just sucking knowledge from you, but not really truly giving any value back. So yeah, podcast is such a great vehicle for creating value for others and putting it out there, and everybody wins with a podcast.
With podcasting and someone building their personal brand, do you have a recommendation or are there some guidelines people might think about when it comes to deciding, do you have your own podcast or do you do, the podcast guesting circuit or some combination thereof? How do you help people kind of navigate that?
A combination is the best solution or the best strategy. The question comes your bandwidth. How much time do you have? Because starting a podcast is easy, but it's also hard. So in 2021, we had the biggest spike in creating podcasts for our clients. Everybody wanted a podcast after 2020. Everyone was bored at home. And then it went down in 2022. Pod fade is what we call it. You don't make it past three months or 12 episodes. So what I find is that the podcasts can be easy to start, low-hanging fruit, really, really challenging and difficult to maintain because people lack systems and processes and teams. You know this through running your company. Those are critical. So if you're a solo caster or a solopreneur and you're like, I'm going to do that, please keep in mind, at some point, you're going to have to pass this off to a team, whether you develop your own or you hire a company like ours. But then also what's happening is people who have figured that out are seeing the long-term benefits of that, because a podcast is really a long-term play. It's not a short-term. You can't go in and go, I'm going to start a podcast for 3 to 6 months, see how it goes. No, you have to commit. Now it's YouTube. You have to commit to 100 videos before you see the fruit that bears from all of that hard work and energy that you're pouring in. Yeah, going in with a long-term mindset, having a budget for it, and not just winging it, say, okay, I am developing systems and processes if I'm doing it myself so that I can document and pass this off to an editor, because it's not sustainable. You need to run your business in order to have success. You need to sell the thing that you do, but the podcast can be used for that. The podcast has to lead with value and information. Here's the thing. Information can be had anywhere, right? Go on YouTube. It's abundant. What you want to do is lead with value, entertainment. If you can be somewhat entertaining on on your show, then that will draw people in because the information you're sharing is most likely someone else is sharing it too, but no one's giving the perspective that you have from your experiences. So yeah, I would just say it's a great avenue, but just step in knowing that it's not easy.
Every day, your top performers are buried under emails, scheduling, and reporting. Work that doesn't move the needle. The result? Frustration, burnout, and worst of all, lost revenue. That's why we created the Executive's Guide to Scaling High Performers, a simple, battle-tested framework to eliminate busy work and unlock your team's full potential. Inside, you'll get the exact steps top executives use to retain A players, boost productivity, and free up their team for high-impact work. Stop losing revenue. Go to workergenics.com/growthhub or check the episode notes to download the Executive's Guide to Scaling High Performers now. So when someone knows they're good, they've heard you say, "Hey, it's not easy. You got to stick with it." It's still hard though. What are some tips or strategies that you offer people when they're getting into the podcast to stick with it for the long term and not get that burnout or get bored of it?
Yeah, I think that looking for results that are not realistic can really deter you long term. What we need to do is flip the coin and say, who can I help and who can I serve? And look for those stories and those opportunities when you're creating your content. So for example, many years though into my podcast journey, a listener reached out to me and to the point where I thought we should have a conversation. And what he had shared with me over the phone was, thank you for sharing the story about how you had to fold one of your companies because I am in the process of doing that and I'm alone. And I felt like such a loser. And hearing you, who he sees me for some reason as a success, I'm, trying to make my way too, just like him. But he had a business for, I think, 15 or 20 years, a restaurant business, and it was suffering as a result of all the madness at the time. But he said, thank you for sharing. I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. Like I felt like I was a complete failure. And you sharing your story made me feel like there's a community, and thank you. Dude, I still live off the fumes of that conversation. Like I still feel like, wow, this is the value I'm providing, because that's one person. Imagine all the people that don't reach out to you that you've helped. Always take those stories, put them in your back pocket, and then create those as fuel for you to continue on your journey, to continue like, I'm helping someone. I know this is helping someone, versus where's the ROI? I'm not making my money back. It's who are you helping? Who are you serving? How are you solving? And also inspiring people to keep doing what they do, even though it may not be working. So yeah, that's where I usually land.
No, I love that story of getting that feedback and how it's still motivating you today. I get the same thing. Every random times I'll get like a text from someone in my network that I had no idea listened to the podcast. And like, hey, I really love that episode with, Erik on this, talking about these things. So I encourage all of you that are listening to podcasts, just like shoot a text or an email to that podcast host that you're listening to. It goes so far and, helps keep those podcasts that you like and support going. It's an amazing thing. So really appreciate you bringing that part up, Erik.
Yeah.
Talking about the effort that goes into these podcasts, it can be very time consuming, not just like the time investment for getting the number of episodes, but just processing it, managing guests, editing, publishing, promoting, all that kind of stuff. At what point do you typically see it makes sense to start like handing off some of that process to, service like yours, or maybe an assistant or something like that?
If you have, and I'm putting quotes out there because everyone has a different value that they attach to success in their business. But if you have a budget, figure out what that is, number one, for marketing. Intake form, where we try to figure out if they qualify to work with us or we could serve them at the highest value we can. There's a certain threshold that, we're $2,500 a month at minimum, but then we have other sort of services above that. But at minimum, I need to know if you have 30 grand to invest annually in what we do. If you don't, it may be best for you to figure out, okay, I want to hire a bunch of VAs to do this, right? Whether they're $5 to $8 an hour, what skill sets do they need to have? Because everyone's going to say that they have editing skills. Everyone's going to say they have design skills, but you need to look and see, hey, can I see some of the samples? And hey, check this out. They may send samples because we produce hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of episodes per year. What's funny about that is some of them send me our own work. You didn't do that. We did that.
Oh,
so
wow.
Just get referrals, get people to ensure that, like, oh, this is your work. Can I see, like, if they have it in a Google Drive or things like that, those are indicators like they own that file. If they're sending you links off of YouTube, like I've seen, I would just check the validity of that. But building your own team, you would need at least somebody who knows and has some prowess in editing videos, because that's a different beast. And then design, like you need someone who understands design, not just design 101, but someone who can take a template from Canva and make it shine, because there's a lot of stuff that people grab into Canva and it's just bloop, they did nothing to it and you could tell. It looks very amateurish. So, but that's okay. If you're just starting out, don't let that hold you back. Everything doesn't have to be super duper polished, but I would say figure out what your budget is. If it's $100 a month, then it's $100 a month. Find someone to help you and start to take those little things off of your plate so that you can go begin building your business, doing sales, doing marketing versus the tactical things that anybody can do, and hire somebody like Workergenics to ensure that you're getting quality people that aren't throwing you work that you've done. Like, hey, look what I did. Oh, that's funny. Okay. I'm not hiring you.
Yeah, I believe that. Well, one thing, Eric, that you talk about is like building brand champions, people who can amplify the message. What is your take on that, and how can companies do that intentionally?
Brand champions develop over time when you continue to serve your clients at the highest possible level that you can. So those are basically your testimonies, your case studies. Whenever you go to someone that you served and you're like, hey, how did I do? And they're like, you're amazing. Especially if someone comes to you unsolicited and they're like, dude, Harley, thank you so much. You've helped me. You've changed my life. That's the perfect opportunity to go, hey, how can I get a testimonial from you? Can you record something really quick, like right here, and say that again? And then from there, you start to realize you can actually leverage that to become a brand champion for you, because then you can continue to ask them, hey, do you know anyone like you that needs our services? Do you know anyone like you that could help us grow? And for sure, they love you, right? And you've probably given them super duper discounts. That's why they love you. Typically, the earlier stages of business, like they're getting a really good deal. They're grandfathered in, so to speak. Yeah, those are the brand champions that you want to continue to build. Just love on them, continue to serve beyond the agreement that you had, and it will happen over time for sure.
If someone hasn't been really thinking about or familiar with this concept of brand champions, they've been established for maybe a few years, they've got some clients. What's a good way to maybe like try to bring that up with clients that they think might be happy, but maybe haven't come forward yet? Or if they did come forward, it was like in the past and they weren't ready to capture that appropriately.
Yeah, I think that, well, if it's a client that is no longer your client, you could still reach out, reach out to a bunch of them and say, hey, I'm looking to grow my business. What I do is I'll typically say, if you enjoyed working together, would you mind referring someone like you that we can help, someone that we can provide the service that we provided for you for the next person? And then if you do that enough, there's going to be someone hopefully that is willing to say, record a testimonial for you, or even at the very least, write a review. So here's the other cool sort of, for lack of a better word, hack is I'll write the testimonials for some of my clients that I know are super busy in their voice. And this was before AI. So now you could really do it in AI where you say, hey, write a review of my services in their voice. And you could take a blog article or something and put it into ChatGPT, and then it'll do it. And it's short, just a sentence, and then send it over to them. For example, in my book, I have 6 quotes, of which only one I had to do that. And I know him very well. And I was like, hey, Rami, I know you're busy. I know you've been meaning to do this. I did it for you. Here's 3 options, all in your voice, because he's an author. He's like, these are great. But he sent it back to me and he massaged it. He changed it it just got him started, right? It lit the fire. And he's like, oh, this is great. How'd you do this? It's like ChatGPT. He's like, this sounds like me, but I just made some changes. Here it is. So those are ways that you can help them, right? To help you by just saying, hey, I did the work for you, but you know that they're most likely going to say, no, this is good, but I'm going to change it. People have done it for me too. They're like, hey, Eric, this is a review that I wrote in your voice. So that's where I'm like learning this stuff. Like, oh, this is effective. This is definitely helpful.
That's a smart hack. Well, you mentioned your book, Eric. Tell us a little bit more about this book that you have.
Oh, man. So 3 years ago, I was tasked, I committed, it was 5K. I didn't do the 10K with, I'll give them a shout out, Chandler Bolton Self-Publishing School. 10K, they would have done all the work, all the Amazon back end, self-publishing type stuff. What they did give me was a monthly coach. And I recognized, Harley, that I'm not great with monthly coaching because I don't know, it's just not my thing. And then someone who says, you have access to the vault, all this library of content. It didn't work for me. So I sat on it for 3 years. And it wasn't necessarily that system or process. I'm sure that if I was ready back then, it would have came out with his help. It was really the crux of the actual book because I didn't find myself interesting enough and worthy enough, honestly, to have this book. So I would read it a year later. I'm like, this is terrible. So I sat on it because it was all about me. And what I recognized through, especially through my faith journey over the past couple of years, personal branding is very egocentric. And in Christianity, it's less about that. It's actually not about us. It's not about me. So that's when I shifted the whole theme of the book to glorify him, to glorify God, not me, and giving him the credit. And I started to recognize and get flashbacks when I was a kid. Whenever they would win their Super Bowl, whenever they would win, the World Series, there would be these faith-driven athletes that would point up and go, first and foremost, at the Oscars, they used to do this. Now they're the opposite. But, first and foremost, I want to give glory to God. And that's all I realized that I need to do. And I felt it's amazing after that. And everything flowed. I wrote the book in less than 24 hours after that. So yeah, the book is called Be Your Brand to Glorify God. And it's all about building your personal brand and your company around your mission to serve. And like Jesus did, he just lived to serve. He washed his disciples' feet. And I feel like in business, that's what we do, right? We just love on our clients the way he did. We want to serve and we just want to help and we want to make the world better. And that's really the book. The book is about how we can give him the glory and stop building for our own egos, because that will only take you so far. That's what happened to me. I would speak on stages and people would line up to speak to me. And I felt like there's something missing. This is not about me. And I didn't understand what that was. It was an internal struggle that I was having. And the book sort of unraveled and gave me clarity. And hopefully it gives others clarity as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing these incredible tips and strategies, your story, and about your book as well. If people want to learn more about you or get a copy of the book, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, for sure. So if you go to beyourbrandnow, capital NOW.com, you can see the book there. You can actually download a free core values work exercise where we talked about earlier here, identifying your core values. We do have a download there for you into a worksheet so that you can start the process of identifying what your values are so that you can put it out there in the world. Yeah, beyourbrandnow.com.
Awesome. Those of you listening will make sure to have those links in the show notes. And if you got value from this episode, do one quick thing. Hit like and subscribe so you don't miss future strategies to help you scale smarter. And maybe you know a business owner or have a colleague who could use this information. Share the episode with them. It could be exactly what they need right now. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, leave us a quick rating. It helps us reach more leaders like you. And as always, thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.